Hi there, I'm Tony Vlahos for ExecuNet. Crushing executive level job interviews is a skill. It's not a gift, which means if you don't feel you've got that skill, well, you can acquire it. ExecuNet Director of Coaching Services, Harriette Lowenthal, has helped hundreds of top people develop the skills needed to succeed in those high stakes situations. And today, she'll share some of her best advice with you. Now, if you have an interview coming up, and would love to privately sharpen your own interview skills, Harriette is offering one-to-one time on her calendar to ensure you're super prepared. There's a link at the bottom of the video. Follow it to learn more. With that, Harriette, thanks for making time today.
My pleasure.
So let's cut right to it, Harriette. In your mind and your experience, what separates the executive who succeeds at the interview from all the runner-ups? What's the defining criteria, if you will?
Preparation, if I could summarize it into one word. And it's separation through the entire continuum. I won't go into it on this particular chat this morning, but how you get in the door matters. We know that only 15% of executives secure an interview simply by applying, I call it blindly online. So definitely being recruited by a recruiter, if that makes sense, whether being found on LinkedIn or otherwise, or having someone tell you about a job and helping you navigate through the process, those two are important. And they come to mind because it just so happens that I'm coaching two individuals, respectively, who have gotten in the door through both of those avenues. And both came to me with a need for preparation.
What are some of those, let's call them cringy mistakes, Harriette, that you notice executives who go into those interviews habitually make and make you go, I wish you wouldn't do that? What are some of those things that capture your attention?
Well, there's oversell themselves, if you will. They don't take the time to align what mini stories or examples they're going to provide in terms of the value that they bring to that organization, how they're going to help that organization solve its problems or address opportunities and challenges, as well as what is it about themselves in terms of the culture, their personal values, and fit. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is due diligence. What work have you done in terms of the company, in terms of the position, if you know it? And thirdly, the people who are going to interview you when you get to that point.
One of the questions that we know our executive audience dreads is the seemingly simple, so tell me about yourself. In broad strokes, how should one answer that question? What does it first actually mean to be asked that question? And how would you recommend someone handle that one?
It's funny you ask that because I just read a post recently that the executive interviewer flat out asks, what is your why? And that is really the question they're asking. A little bit about who you are, how you got here, what excites you, how do you see yourself? Do you have a realistic picture of yourself? So accurate self-insight, if you will. And it also helps as you're answering that question to present your executive presence and how you engage with others and so forth. It doesn't mean that it's a therapy session and you have to tell your complete life story, start to finish, but it does mean that you should have that awareness about how your early life has impacted the executive that you've become.
Now, you mentioned preparation, you've underscored it. What if hypothetically you're super prepared, but you're an anxious wreck? I mean, people can go in prepared, and yet that emotional moment seizes them, and suddenly they're like deer in the What do you recommend they do differently in that situation?
Well, in most of the coaching that I do, even though we discuss interview strategy, we talk about preparation, there's also some practice in there, or mock interviews, if you will. So depending upon one's angst and their biggest trigger that they think might confront them, we actually practice how to respond to that. Very often it's, answering the question, that's wonderful that you achieved that result. Can you contrast that with a situation where perhaps you missed the mark or things didn't turn out as planned? So you can be prepared to answer that question. And that shows, again, that self-awareness of, I don't think as many answer or ask strengths and weaknesses as much at the executive level, but you can talk about what you missed and what you learned from it. And then if appropriate, what you did differently in a similar situation in the future. The other is to feel free to say, let me consider that for just a moment, and feel free to press pause, gather your thoughts or whatever. And thirdly, have your notes. It's easier, obviously, on a Zoom interview, which are still very popular. But you could have notes along the margins of your resume in pencil, I usually suggest, that you can refer to, and there's nothing wrong with that. It demonstrates that you have prepared and you are interested in answering their questions.
One last question, Harriette. When the interview is concluded, do you advise executives to send personal thank you notes to the interviewers? And if so, what should they convey?
Well, 100% yes. And actually, I just got this question from one candidate this morning who's getting ready to go into 2 panel interviews. And the advice I provided was, yes, you can send one email to the entire panel, thanking them for their time, emphasizing or acknowledging something specifically that you've spoken about, and inviting them to come back to you if they have any specific questions. I also said, if you connected to one individual, or if you're in a one-on-one, feel free to also send that separate email. And if you have it, some kind of creative summary, oftentimes our executives will use a one-page document, graphic representation. You can send that as sort of, here's a recap of some of the things that we spoke about during our interview. But yes, thank yous are appreciated, and they're also very necessary.
Terrific. So listen, if you've got an interview coming up and you'd like to privately sharpen those skills and be super prepared, again, follow the link and connect with Harriette, and you'll be so much better off if you do. With that, thank you, Harriette, for making time and sharing your insight as always.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye for now.